Hey everyone, Toledo Joe here from 222 Paranormal Podcast. So it is 12:47 a.m. in the morning. We're recording bright and early tomorrow because it's a very busy day here in the studio. I stopped in to set up everything and realized I did not turn the AC on. It is like 97 degrees in the studio here. I am like burning up. I'm sweating like a pig. But anyhow, I want to talk to you guys about Robert the Doll. Now, a lot of you guys have heard of Robert the Doll. Probably 99% of you out there have heard about Robert the Doll, but I'll tell you at the end how you've heard of him, okay? So anyways, story starts out. Mr. and Mrs. Otto were going to have a baby. So, Mrs. Otto sent Mr. Otto over to the Bahamas to pick up some servants, basically some slaves. He was over there for a little longer than what he was supposed to be. When he came back with the servants, one of the servant girls was pregnant by him. Yeah. Mrs. Otto found out and freaked out. She took this girl that was pregnant by Mr. Otto, put her in the outhouse for 9 months, only feeding her once a day, bread and water. Okay? The girl eventually had the baby, and the baby only lived for like 3 months. Okay? Mrs. Otto wanted to punish her some more, so what she did was when she had her baby, Eugene Robert Otto, she took and made this servant girl take care of him. Okay? It kind of backfired on her. The servant girl fell in love with Eugene Robert Otto and basically raised him as her own. Well, one day, Mrs. Otto went out in the backyard and saw all the servants performing their religious rituals, which is a form of voodoo. She walks out and they're cutting a head off a chicken, okay, for religious purposes. She freaks out again, okay, takes all the servants, sells them back, makes this slave girl go back to the Bahamas. Well, this girl was devastated, okay. She begged her not to send her back, but Mrs. Otto did. She loved little Eugene Robert Otto, so as her own. So she made him a doll. Okay, it was a 3-foot doll made out of cloth, that had eyes, just like a little kid. And Eugene, it turns out that this doll was Eugene's only playmate on the whole island. Okay, and he would be seen walking around carrying the doll everywhere he went. I mean, no matter what. Okay? And I'm talking as he got older, too. He would carry this doll around all the time. Well, when the doll first started coming into the house, things started to get weird. Okay? Things would come up missing. Things would become broken and stuff. And, of course, Mrs. Otto went to Eugene and yelled at him like our parents did, used our full name. She would yell out, Eugene Robert Otto, what did you do? And stuff. And Eugene would always yell back, my name's not Eugene Robert Otto, it's Eugene. And he said, I'm not Robert, he's Robert. And he'd point at the doll. And he would always say, I didn't do it, Robert did. Okay, and the mom would scold him some more, and he kept saying, no, I didn't do anything. Robert does it. Okay. So anyways, time goes on, and the family decides to move to France. Okay. And the mother ends up taking the doll, Robert the doll, and locking him in a trunk and putting him up in the attic. Eugene asked, where's the doll? And the mother would not tell him. I don't know what story she said, but she wouldn't tell him. And they end up moving to France. Okay. Eugene ends up meeting this girl and ends up getting married. As a wedding present, the family, mother and father, I should say, gives them the house in Florida. Okay, so they move in, and time goes on as they're doing stuff. All of a sudden, he finds this trunk with Robert the Doll in it. And everything starts up again, same way he did before. He would walk around, and he's a grown married man now. He'd walk around carrying the doll, talking to it. His wife would hear him in the other room talking to the doll as if carrying on a conversation with another person. Well, this one stuff starts to get really weird. Okay? He starts getting more violent towards his wife. Okay? Beating her when she's sleeping. He beats her. And hits her in the face and everything and gets really violent. When she confronts him about it, he keeps saying, I didn't do it. Robert did it. Robert does everything. It was his fault. He did it. And she would be like, okay, whatever. You know, you're just an abusive person. Well, one day she's out in the backyard. And the outhouse that they kept the servant girl in is now just a shed. She steps in the shed. All of a sudden, the door locked, slams shut, and gets locked. And she's screaming and pounding on the door. Well, she ends up staying in there for 3 days. Okay? Finally, Eugene comes out, opens the door, and she's screaming at him. You know, she's tired. She hasn't ate, drank. I mean, she's stuck in this place for 3 days. And it's the same outhouse that they had the servant girl in. So, once again, he proclaims that he didn't do anything. It was Robert. Okay, so the one day he came to her and said, Robert wants a room with a view. He wants a room with windows because they kept him in the attic. So on top of the house is a widow's nook or a turret with windows in it. Eugene ends up making all the furniture, everything size for this doll, for his 3-foot doll. They would hear footsteps running around up in the room, and kids in the neighborhood used to come down the street, look up in the window, and see the doll running around the room. They would see the doll looking out the windows, and it became like a common thing for them to look up and see this doll. Well, one day, in 1974, Eugene was found dead on the floor with Robert the doll on top of him with his hands around Eugene's neck. So it looks like the doll killed him. This freaked the wife out, of course, and the wife decided to move back to France. So she rented out the house, but with the stipulation that Robert the doll always stayed in the turret or the widow's nook on top of the house. The renters would hear the same thing. They would hear footsteps. They'd hear children laughing, you know, as if the doll was laughing. The problem is that none of these renters would stay in the house for long because things would happen. And one of the freaky things, too, is that room was locked from the inside. They couldn't lock it from the outside, but the door was always locked. But they would hear weird things. Things would come up missing in the house. Things would disappear. One day, one of the renters woke up and Robert the doll was standing on their bed holding a kitchen knife. That was it. They took Robert the doll to this museum in Key West, and that's basically where he sits now. When he got to the museum, more weird things happened there. In the morning, the museum people come in, and there'd be stuff everywhere, scattered everywhere, as if somebody went on a rampage and knocked stuff over. They would see dirty footsteps through the museum, and when they got to Robert, they would see that the bottom of his feet actually had dirt on them, as if he was running around the museum all night. So what they did was they would actually ended up putting him in a glass case, and that's where he sits now. And it's told that he changes positions in this glass case. But, okay, so let me get to the point where I told you guys that you all know who Robert the Doll is. But you don't know him by Robert the Doll. You know him as Chucky. And that's the story of Robert the Doll. Thanks for watching. And make sure you tune into the podcast, 222 Paranormal Podcast. We come out with a show every Sunday at 2:22 p.m. It can be heard on everywhere that you get your podcasts from. iHeartRadio, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts from. So tune in, and hope you enjoy the show, and hope you'll enjoy this little story about Chucky, the haunted doll, which is really Robert the Doll. So get down there and I don't know if I mentioned this at the beginning. Don't take his picture unless you ask him for permission first, or bad things will happen to you. All right? Thank you for watching, and goodbye.